Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are back with another Neurodiversity Stories with myself, the host, Darren Clark. So guys, we have been running these now for quite a few weeks, and I think this is our fifth episode, and every single week, without fail, we have incredible guests, all happy to share their experiences with neurodiversity, but also as well, their stories. Now, what are we about and why are we doing this? So as I mentioned, my name is Darren Clark. I found out that I was dyslexic and had ADHD at the age of 37. And since then, I've been on a global mission to spread more awareness around neurodiversity on a global level. So I'm a global neurodiversity consultant. So I work with organizations and the educational system to raise more awareness through teaching, training, and speaking. So guys, as I mentioned before, we have had incredible guests throughout our neurodiversity stories. And today, with no exception, we have another amazing guest. We have Catrina Anne Lowri, and she's a SENCO teaching director at Neuroteachers. There we go. And we're going to be basically talking to her around neurodiversity. We're going to be having a great conversation. So I would love it if you could, in the chat, just let us know where you're from, why you're tuning in, and it would be absolutely amazing to have your support on that one as well. So without further ado, I'm going to let Catrina introduce herself. Now, we met on the power of social media, the power of LinkedIn, and I've been kind of following her posts, the amazing stuff she's done. She even converted me to come back to Twitter. Now, I kind of made myself I closed down my Twitter account many, many moons ago. And in fact, she was incredibly welcoming and actually got me tweeting again. So guys, without further ado, we're going to bring on Catrina, and she's going to be able to share her amazing stories. Catrina, good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I had to. It just kind of popped in my mind about the Twitter thing. I didn't even have that planned, but that took some kind of some convincing to me to go back onto Twitter. Don't worry, we will speak about other things than Twitter. But I literally, closed the account down, and then you said, "Oh, there's some amazing connections on there," and it is. I totally agree. There's an incredible wealth of knowledge on there, isn't there?
Yeah, I would just say, like in terms of neurodiversity, there's obviously the hashtag neurodiversity and neurodiverse, which is really good to follow. There's lots of amazing people doing some great research, which I'll definitely talk about during this interview. Since I've been on there in October, I've actually I've learned an awful lot, and also it's really nice to have a community around you. If you are neurodiverse, and particularly if you're a neurodiverse teacher, then it's actually really handy to know that there are other people who are in the same sort of situation and understand, what you've been doing and how it, it causes its own interesting ways around things when you're a teacher, if you're a little bit neurodiverse like myself.
I can imagine. But thank you for that, Catrina. If you wouldn't mind just telling a little bit about yourself, who you are and kind of what you do, kind of introduce yourself to all the people that are watching this. That'd be amazing.
Well, hello, everybody. So I'm Catrina. I am, as I have said, a neurodiverse teacher. I currently run a company called Neuroteachers. And it is a company designed around helping inclusion for children who are neurodiverse, specifically autism and related conditions, because that's what my qualification is in. But it's also around helping general neurodiversity and inclusion. I'm very passionate about inclusion, and also I'm working on a exclusion prevention project with the Autism Centre for Education and Research at Birmingham University at the moment. Okay. I've got quite a lot going on. Up until quite recently, I was a SENCO in a school, but I've kind of had to give that up because my private work has taken off so much. So there's a lot of things I could talk about, really. As I say, I'm neurodiverse myself, so maybe we should talk about that.
Absolutely. And the thing is, it's great. I said to the other day when I called, I said, it'd just be a quick couple of minute call. And then I think we were on the phone for about an hour. So it was only in the sense of so much to talk about and so so much that we can kind of relate to it in that sense. So I think when we have people in, well, the message that we're trying to spread with these neurodiversity stories is we're not just trying to attract people with about people that have with neurodiversity. We're also spreading the message to get people that maybe don't know much about neurodiversity, and the different elements that come with that. So and hence why we want to kind of create as much awareness as possible. So I think the first question would be to ask, when did you first kind of realize, did you go down the route of the diagnosis, or was it the case of the fact that you kind of researched and you knew that was something that you had?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I owe it all to Esther Ranson, if I'm honest with you. So I knew I had a bit of a spelling and reading difference. I come from like a really bright academic family. Both my parents were university professors. They're actually psychiatrists. My brother and sister are also very bright. And my brother's younger than me. He's 18 months younger than me. And it was quite noticeable around about early primary school that I wasn't picking up reading and writing in the same way that my brother was. Like, I had an encyclopedic knowledge of facts. I had amazing general knowledge, so they knew I wasn't, there wasn't any kind of like cognitive difficulty, but just wasn't really picking up the reading and writing with the way my brother was.
And this was in primary school, was it? That
was primary school, actually. My early primary school was actually in the States, so I was in about first grade, which would be like 6-7 years old.
Yeah.
So I remember quite distinctly, I went to gymnastics class with my mum's friend who was a teacher and her daughter. And I remember quite distinctly sitting in the back of the car and my mum asking this other lady advice about helping me with my reading, and her describing how my brother would read a word like toast and he could read it straight off, whereas I'd have to sound it out and I'd get stuck on the vowel sounds. And to this day, I still have a real problem with vowel sounds, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then that kind of like made me think, oh, that's... like I started to worry a little bit then, because you do when you hear adults talk. And then sort of fast forward to we moved back to Britain, and my brother and I were watching That's Life, the Esther Ranson program.
No, well.
and Esther Ranson was talking about her daughter who'd just been diagnosed with this thing called dyslexia. I mean, it was the 80s, like there wasn't really much awareness around.
Yeah.
And she described it in quite a lot of detail. It was kind of quite a tragic episode, actually. It made it sound like it was a really sad thing to happen. But my brother just looked at me and went, do you know what, Trine? That's a bit like you. And I was like, actually, do you know what? It is a little bit like me. And then this is the way I remember it anyway. My parents might remember it slightly differently. I remember saying to my mum and dad, oh, there's this thing called dyslexia, and I think I might have it. Is there anything we can do about that? Anyway, my memory of it was that my mum was skeptical, but my dad thought it was worth looking at. Yeah. And he had connections with educational psychologists. So he found me this educational psychologist called Dr. Carl, who I think was probably private. And I had to go to this and do this really long test that took about half a day. Yeah. And I don't remember much about it. They did like these little puzzles and stuff, Yeah,
I mean, I think it's kind of set out. If anyone knows, the process of those tests, and feel free to share it in the comments. I just know it's especially with the younger, when you're a child. I guess it's those tests that you don't feel like it's a test. It's kind of
it's sort of like a game, really. I mean, there was lots of like little puzzles with little blocks and stuff, and there was also the one I had that I know he was quite impressed by, where there was like, you'd have like 4 pictures on a page, and then there'd be a word that he would read out, and he'd have to say you'd have to point to the one that was most like it. Yeah. And one of the words was carcinogenic, and there was a cigarette on an ashtray, and I pointed to that. And the other one was ecclesiastical, and there was a picture of a church, and I pointed to that. And he was really impressed by that. I was 9. So my vocabulary was not a problem, really. Like I said, I was from quite an educated home, and we watched documentaries and went to museums, so I had that advantage. Like there was other ways I could get information. Yeah. So as it turned out, I was moderately to severely dyslexic, but my IQ was above average, so that would explain a lot, really.
Yes.
in that. And then, it being the 80s, there wasn't a huge amount of help. And I think you've kind of talked a little bit about this in your own experience, Darren, but we had to go to like a hut and do these like colouring in things and do lots of handwriting, tons and tons of handwriting.
Like the handwriting would cure, any kind of any problems before.
I mean, the thing is, right, there is a thing when you're dyslexic. I don't know whether you did this as a child, but I always thought like small writing was neat. And also, if I wrote it really small, then they might be able to see that I couldn't spell.
I used to, try and learn to kind of, join up the writing and make it as curly as possible. Because I couldn't spell some of the words. I thought if I just put like a little circle in there, then I could miss a few letters out, and they'd be thinking, one, that's incredible writing, and two, we'll pass that. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I did exactly that. I did loops and everything. And I made it really easy.
Mine was basically just loops, really, with a
lots and lots of loops, which works really well now because they teach cursive in all schools, so the dyslexic kids must be getting away with it. No, I'm sorry, I'm being cynical there. I mean, I understand that cursive writing is supposed to help dyslexic people. I know that's something the Dyslexia Society recommend, and I do sort of get it, but I definitely used it to hide things because I have decent handwriting because I spent a lot of time in that hut drawing and then colouring in pictures an awful lot. I don't know really why. So it didn't seem to help an awful lot. And also as well, there was a bit of a label, like going to Mrs. Solly's office was,
Yeah, I think that, how did you, so you watched the program for This Is Life, This Is which I remember, all too well, really, really well. And then they were talking about dyslexia. So then you kind of had that, that kind of connection with that element. And then did you then get the support with the dyslexia? I know you were put into kind of I don't
know. I mean, I kind of think that I probably benefited from having middle-class parents, if I'm honest with you, right? This is an interesting question that came up. So I've got a friend, and she is what's called a parental engagement teacher. So she works with a lot of hard-to-reach families. And I was asking her some questions about my autism research and like the correlation between being a hard to reach family and being neurodiverse. And she said, and this is a really good quote, actually, how middle class do you have to be to actually get a diagnosis?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard enough negotiating the system when you are quite educated and a decent reader yourself. But if you're not,
I think it comes down to, I can talk from my experience, especially, going to school in, the 80s and 90s, the word dyslexia just wasn't something that was in context in any way, shape or form. If it was, I just wasn't, privy to it or, aware of it. So I can imagine the sheer battle it's almost, making people, like it is now, I guess, in some countries, in certain parts of the world as well, to make people understand what dyslexia actually is, then how to kind of support it. There's so many different battles that you have to have. It's not as simple as we think my child may have, or I may have dyslexia. How do we then, what's the process? And there is a process that we can kind of iron out now, but there are so many situations in the past, and I guess even now, it's a really tough fight, to go through that whole process. It is, and add in when you've got people who've got like multiple diagnoses. I mean, I have two myself, but like I said, I have the benefit of A, I'm quite educated, I know systems, and B, my parents are psychiatrists. So, I had all the advantages possible, and it was still hard. So what it's got to be like for somebody who doesn't have those advantages, I don't know. I mean, there are lots of people who don't get any kind of diagnosis with their neurodiversity until, well into adulthood these days, yourself included. But, it's very common now that people are finding they get diagnosis when they're in their 50s, 60s, especially, women with autism, especially. I know of somebody who's 55 who's just had a diagnosis. Yeah, it's incredible. I was speaking to a gentleman, 76, and literally just got a diagnosis of dyslexia and ADHD. And literally just through LinkedIn, just messaged and said, I've been following the stuff that you've been doing, and it's pushed me to get a diagnosis, and I've been diagnosed, and 56, 76. I mean, it's and just speaking to that gentleman, and I was, my heart went out to him, because he said, I've lived my whole life thinking that I was, and words that was kind of given to him in the sense that he felt, he was stupid and wasn't able to achieve certain things. And it was kind of, he said it was a big relief, but then it was frustration that he hadn't got that diagnosis before, and as well. So I want to get on to, I've got so many questions for you. If you've got any questions for Catrina, then please pop them in the chat. And again, this is an opportunity to connect and with anyone else. If you could let us know where you're tuning in from, and feel free to chat amongst yourself as well. So Catrina, I want to talk to you about the exclusion prevention project, if you don't mind, that you're currently working on. Incredibly interested in that. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that.
Okay, well, it's a little project for what's called, I'm working in association with the Autism Centre for Education and Research, which is at the University of Birmingham. So I initially was a modern foreign languages teacher, and I sort of meandered into special needs because of a specific student. And I'll tell you that story in a minute, though, because we're talking about the exclusion prevention. But let me tell you about Colin in a minute, okay?
Okay.
Cross my fingers so I won't forget. So I did the master's degree with ASA, and I can be quite persistent. So I kept emailing my head of department because I wanted to become a distance learning tutor for the autism course. And eventually she said, I haven't got that, but I've got this project which you might be interested in. So in 2018, I broke my leg. This is relevant, believe me. In 2018, I broke my leg and I had some time off. So I thought I would have to do something. So I decided that I would write an academic paper, as you do, for the Good Autism Practice Journal, which is probably like one of the best known journals around. It's quite well established. And I wrote it about a case study I did with a young man who had a diagnosis of autism, ADHD, and what we call in this county demand avoidant behaviours. So have you heard of pathological demand avoidance?
I've heard of the first part.
Pathological. You've heard of pathological.
Pathological.
It's a little bit controversial. Now, I'm aware that there probably will be people who are viewing this who are autistic or who identify as autistic, may not have a diagnosis, and there may also be parents and teachers watching this. So I am going to caveat by saying that I understand that there is a lot of controversy around the idea of PDA, or pathological demand avoidance. I'm not very keen on the term pathological because it makes it sound like it's a very negative connotation, and neither was Elizabeth Newton, who described the condition. But basically, there are a subset of individuals on the autism spectrum who behave in a slightly different way from other autistic people. Now, that obviously sounds like a bit of a sweeping generalization because everyone behaves differently because we're all as unique as our thumbprint, aren't we?
We are indeed.
So, to quote Lorna Wing, when you've met one child with autism, you have met one child with autism. Everybody is unique little snowflakes. We're all different. But there's this element of demand avoidance which comes in for some of the learners that I work with. Now, the reason that they do it is mainly because they have much higher levels of cortisol, which cause high levels of stress. So autistic people have a higher level of cortisol generally. It's medically proven, it's the research is there to show that. And those who have demand avoidant behavior tend to have even higher levels of cortisol. So they have a naturally enlarged amygdala, and the amygdala is a glandular organ towards the bottom of your brain. It's kind of like if I was to drill a hole through here, which I'm not going to do because that would be trepanning and that's not a brilliant idea, through here, then it would kind of be level with my nose. Right. And it's about the size of an almond, and that's what produces your cortisol. So if you heard of cortisol before,
Yep, got it. Yeah.
So cortisol is your stress,
Yes.
stress, flight or fight response. So if you're constantly in a fight or flight response, then you might get quite anxious and stressed. And if you are a relatively intelligent young person who has autism as well and a really phenomenal imagination, then you might, for example, use some quite bizarre and what a neurotypical person would call bizarre and unusual behavior. So, for example, some of my young learners will be tigers the entire time. So they can't hold a pencil because they've got tiger paws.
Interesting.
That's a very good way of avoiding doing any writing, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
That's kind of like at the gentler end of things. You have to kind of, the way in which you help these people is by kind of getting into their world. So I wrote this whilst I had a broken leg in 2018. I wrote this little piece for the Good Autism Practice Journal. If anybody's interested in it as well, like if you send me a message, then I can send you a link to that. And I prevented exclusion for one boy in one school in Gloucestershire, which is where I live. It doesn't say Gloucestershire on the thing, but that's where I live.
Wow.
And it got quite a lot of interest because PDA is something that is quite of interest to educators and people in the autistic community. Yes. And then as a result of that, Karen Gilberg, who is the head of ASA at the University of Birmingham, asked me to help on this project. So in the project, we're writing some they will be free resources for schools around exclusion prevention for autistic people.
It's incredible.
Thank you.
That is so when you broke your leg, which you thought to yourself, well, actually I'm not just going to rest, I'm going to delve right in and create that. Well, we thank you for that, and as Catrina said, please, if you are interested in that, then put it in in the comments, and I'm sure she'd be delighted to to help you out with that one as well, and send those links off. So how did your career progress? How did you, because you said that you worked as a Senko teacher, and then it was a case of your private work kind of got busier.
Yeah.
How did that get to that stage? What were you kind of doing? Obviously, I know you were kind of working incredibly hard, but
I think when you're neurodiverse, you don't take a straight line through things, do you?
No.
I'm like, okay, that's over there. That's interesting. I want to go here and I need to go there. Oh, that's good. Let's have a look at this. And that's the beauty of it, is so far as I have a therapist because I have bipolar disorder. And it's one of the ways in which I cope. And she always talks about it being the helicopter view, insofar as you can see things from above and from different angles. So you'll want to go in different directions with things. So I've never gone in a straight line with my career. So I became a modern languages teacher. In my second year of teaching, I became head of German. So that was pretty meteoric rise, but it was a school that was like a special measures, like properly tough school. But I needed to do this. Yes. And there was a little boy I was going to tell you about, Colin, wasn't I?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to have to spell out a swear word for this.
Okay.
I'll star it. Okay. I'll put stars in it, but you'll know what I mean. Okay. But I'm not going to say the word. Okay. Right. Okay. So anyway, I was teaching Colin French, and he had autism and global delay, and he was in year 8, and I had to teach him French. And there was, I had cracked it. I knew my differentiation was going to be brilliant. I knew everything there was to know because I was in my second year of teaching, and I cracked it. Right. So I had this foolproof plan to get Colin to do his French. Yeah. He spent most of his time sitting on the floor under the desk, but I eventually got him to sit actually at his desk. I know he just really shouldn't have, he shouldn't have been in that specific class, right? He needed more help socially, really, to be honest. Anyway, I had pictures of fruit with the words written in French underneath up on the board. And then I had a piece of paper with gaps in the picture, and he had to copy the word, right?
Yeah.
Foolproof. There's no way anything can go wrong, right?
Yeah, bless him. Yeah.
I know. I had it sussed this. I was just, Anyway, after a few, he was quiet, and he did seem to be doing some work. So I'm dealing with the rest of the class who were a little bit lively. Year 8 in a London school, And he said, Miss, I've done it. I was like, oh, brilliant, Colin, well done. And I looked down at his page, and underneath every single word, he's written F star, 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 F star, 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 F under every single one. And you know, I just said, Colin, where did you get that word? You're supposed to, you said copy the word, miss.
Wow.
I did copy the word. Now, where was the word? The word was carved in big letters into the desk. F star, star, star. Except, you know, the actual word. That's what was carved into the desk. Now, I hadn't been specific enough, had I?
It was foolproof, Catrina.
But teaching, I knew it all, right? You know, I hadn't told him that it was those words I wanted him to copy.
Yeah,
repeat the word.
But in fairness, like you said, you know, that's showing initiative in the sense of you were very clear, you know, in the sense of copy that word. That's the word, you know, that Colin saw, and put those on. Oh, incredible.
Yeah, so, I mean, love him. You know, that basically, I always say Colin changed my life, because then it made me think, do you know what? I shouldn't really just be teaching this kid French. He needs to learn how to copy, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think, you know, you can take that kind of analogy and, you know, the story into so many different attributes, into kind of, you know, the way that we, you know, maybe in, you know, in the current workplaces, you know, as well. And what could be a simple instruction, you know, that we try and communicate out for someone else, how we decode that. You know, we know within, you know, dyslexia, how we see it and how we decode it, and it comes, you know, comes back, and how we relay it. You know, there's a whole world of things that, you know, that goes on, you know, in amongst those things as well. So I can kind of relate to that in so many, you know, in so many ways.
Literally, there's so many times when I've got, like, people have given me what they think is really, really clear instructions, and I haven't got no clue what they're talking about. And I have to say, look, I really have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. You know, and then they'll think, you know, oh, you must be a bit thick or whatever. But no, I'm not. I just, like, literally, I have a processing problem, and I didn't understand what you said.
Yeah.
You know, write it down, preferably bullet point it for them.
Yeah, no. It is. I guess we presume. I guess we presume that people know exactly what we're saying, or you know, we give some sort of instructions, and then it's, why don't you get it? Almost like it's that person's fault for not getting that information.
It's always and you know, like, and I've talked to you, like, when we talked to ourselves, I said, you know, I had a lot of shame attached to my dyslexia. I had even more shame attached to my bipolar up until probably my 40s. Like, I'm 45 now. I didn't really sort of come to terms with it. Like, I never told anyone I was a dyslexic teacher. I just hid it.
Yeah.
You know, and, like, if I get overwhelmed, like, report writing was a nightmare.
So would that stem into kind of, you know, anxiety in those elements of thinking to yourself, you know, my goodness, I mean, you know, if you've got, it's a teacher, it's an incredible, I always say it's an incredibly, you know, rewarding but incredibly difficult job, especially, you know, well, not just because of the current situation that we're in, but in general, it's an incredibly difficult job. And then to put on top, you know, dyslexia, and then put on top, you know, having reports to write, and not just one, but several. How did that, what was the process with that, and sort of mentally, I guess? You know, would you delay it? Would it?
No, I always do stuff to deadline, because you see, the thing is, I've got my superpower, which is my bipolar, which means I can do things really, really quickly. It doesn't mean they're going to be good, but I can get them done really fast. And, you know, the hyper focus, like you say, 12 hours straight and then fall asleep kind of thing.
Yeah.
I can do that. My first few years of teaching, like, you know, before I had a family, my first few years of teaching, I was like a machine about it. That's how I did it, is because I, like, worked all of the time over stuff, and probably that burnt me out quite a lot. But, you know, I had quite a good range. You know, I got to middle management really quickly, and I stayed there. I mean, I like it there. It's kind of comfortable. I did a bit of leadership stuff as well, but, you know, so I think I hid it really well. Like, I've always been quite good with tech. So I've always used a spell check even before it was a thing.
Yeah.
I always, like, looked up spellings on my phone. I always did it even in lessons when I wasn't sure about stuff. When I started teaching other subjects other than modern languages, I'd say to the kids, like, I'm not really sure how to spell this. I'm just going to check. things like that. And then they got used to it as well, because they'd understand and things like that. But, report writing was a nightmare, because if I'm not told, like I said, I need to know where to start. Yeah. I must know where to finish, because otherwise I'll just write and 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 keep writing until I've said everything that I know about that child.
I get it. Do you have when you say, we have to have a start and we have to have a finish.
Yeah.
How do you finish things in that sense then? Because I sometimes don't know when to switch off.
No, I don't. I just don't know when to finish. And I've been accused of writing really, really long reports. They're like this. Like if I'm just given a blank space, that's what I'll do. But if there's if the school says, right, we're doing a report and you've got to include these 5 elements, then I can write a paragraph around these 5 elements. I'm good, but I need a writing frame.
Yeah. When they say, it has to be, I'm filling in something, I'm a nightmare for trying to write things in stuff anyway. But when they say, it has to be a certain amount of words, I mean, it's probably one of the reasons why I came off Twitter, actually, because I couldn't, before they extended the word allocation, how many words you can put in, because I'm like that with text messages and emails, and I'm almost like, I don't know how to. I start it with the niceties of addressing who it is, and then I will literally write. It could be the most simplest email ever in the sense of, received that, thank you so much, look forward to speaking to you then. But I will go on and on and on and on, and then obviously get it checked and spell checked. I don't know why I do that.
Oh, it's an executive functioning thing. You don't know where to stop, and it's a lovely thing about neurodiversity is that there's this executive functioning difficulty, and it's just like, that's sort of like why I end up working, supporting autistic people, because I have a lot of empathy. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, I don't have autism, right? But I have dyslexia. So I have a big executive functioning problem with that. And I have bipolar. So I have an enlarged amygdala, and my stress levels, my kind of like baseline stress is much higher than and also as well, for both of those, I have massive sensory needs as well. Like, I'm pretty certain I have some kind of sensory processing issue going on. So I have a lot of empathy with autistic learners, and I get where they're coming from a little bit. And I also find it really, really fascinating to see the world in such a radically different way. It's I just find it more interesting than neurotypical.
Absolutely. I learned so much from doing the stories last week with Jack Fitzpatrick, who shared so much knowledge on so many different topics as well. So again, this is why I love doing these stories is to get people's lived experiences of how we deal with things on a day-to-day basis. And it's amazing when I get those similarities, and I learn so much from them as well. I just want to go back to there was a question that I'm just going to bring in. And I'll read out. So I think this was just around when we spoke about the thing. So do you tie in your positive energy levels during the summer to being bipolar or dyslexic? Is this your own assessment, or is it the link scientifically? So I didn't quite get this earlier when you were talking about it. I think. Thank you so much for the question. I think it was just a
no, it's a really good point. Like, I have no research on this. Okay, this is my lived experience. I've forgotten the name of the person. Was it Zephyr?
Yes.
Zera. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. I get my name mispronounced all the time. Okay,
no, that's fine.
Sorry. I really hate it when people do it to me. Anyway, so my lived experience is that I am better. Like, okay, I'm more towards the high, function, high kind of like. Okay, I'm going to say manic and depression. Okay, I don't really like the term manic depression, but I'm going to say manic depression. I'm more manic in the summer and more depressed in the winter. That's my experience. I've spoken to other bipolar people who experienced that too, but I'm not particularly in any bipolar networks. There are 2 reasons for that. The first one is I hate this terminology, and I don't like it being used with autistic learners, but people describe me as being high functioning.
Okay.
insofar as I live with my condition. Like, I'm not personally medicated for my bipolar disorder, right? I am heavily medically monitored, but I do not take any medication presently. So I'm not ruling it out, right? Everybody's different.
Absolutely.
But I've tried every single medication that is available to me apart from lithium. And if lithium can have serious biological effects, like it can cause kidney damage. And I have had kidney failure twice before. So I kind of like my kidneys the way they are. And at the moment, I'm not suffering from any kind of delusions or anything. So I don't medicate. Now, I do have a community psychiatric nurse who I'm not seeing at the moment, but that's because of COVID. But generally speaking, I check in with her about every sort of 6 to 8 weeks to check. And there is the option for me to take medication if I need to. But I'm quite limited insofar as I have allergies to certain things. I can't, for example, I can't take, there's certain, I can't remember the exact names of it. There's certain ingredients and certain things that I can't take. I can't take SSRIs, which are your typical kind of antidepressants.
Right.
That would be like you know, fluoxetine, your Prozac family, because that will cause me to have a manic episode. Now, the reason I know it will cause me to have a manic episode is because I took it and had a manic episode, and I did end up hospitalized as a result.
Oh,
well, yeah, I know. But the thing is, that was when I was doing my PGCE.
Yeah.
My PGCE year, I was hospitalized because my mania was so bad that I had a car crash and I didn't get hurt in any way. It was a really serious car crash. The car's written off and it rolled, right? And the thing is, I was in a Volvo.
Sorry, I'm still shocked about the car crash. I mean,
yeah, I had a car crash, and then somehow my bipolar kind of convinced me that I was impervious.
Okay.
It caused me to have a manic, it kind of was the trigger of my manic episode. And then I started to have a lot of hallucinations, and I believed that I was kind of like, not immortal, but like I couldn't be hurt by anything. So I would just walk out in front of traffic. And, you know, that obviously got quite dangerous. And then I got to the point where I couldn't sleep at all at night, and I was a student and I had other people in the house, and they were getting quite irritated by the fact I would run up and down the stairs all night to try and tire myself out. I could do it for hours. I had like boundless energy. And then I just got to a point one day where I just had like a bit of a serious incident where I tried to throw myself in front of the car. I wasn't trying to throw myself in front of the car because I wasn't going to get hit by the car because I'm impervious. But anyway, a member of the public was concerned about my safety and took me to the local, there was a GP surgery around the corner. And I said, I don't feel very well. And they took me seriously and they took me to hospital, and I ended up staying in overnight for a few. And then I was in for a few, I don't remember. I think it was about a week. And then I was a day patient for about 6 weeks. So consequently, I failed my PGCE because I was mentally ill, and I had to resit part of my PGCE.
Wow.
So that was when I was 22, and I wasn't actually diagnosed with bipolar until I was 32. So it took 10 years. So I spent a lot of time trying out different medications and different therapies and trying to get my combination right for me. And, you know, I've seen a lot of psychiatrists. Eventually, the psychiatrist who gave me the diagnosis when I was 32, his recommendations were that I can't take SSRIs, which is your common antidepressants, which might have been quite helpful to me in the winter, but because they cause me to go so high that I can, you know, like when I hallucinate, it's as real as you are, you know, like I can't tell that it's not a real thing, you know, that's how sort of different it is. And so I have a team around me, but I don't medicate at present. Okay. I'm not ruling it out completely. It's just at the moment, there's nothing that works for me. And I spent about 10 years trying with different combinations and things. So it's part of the reason why I'm not in the bipolar community, because there's a lot of discussion about medication in there. And the second reason is, if you go to the other side of the bipolar community, or people who don't necessarily agree with modern medicine, let's just say, then there's people who advocate self-medication. Now, I don't I don't agree with that either. I agree with medication. If it works for you, take it, but I can't. Yeah. I don't agree with self-medication because it's unregulated, like there's a lot of people who would advocate like things like, THC and things like that to help people. People often tell me that I should take cannabis oil, for example.
But generally, it sounds like you've got, that, like you said, you've got a team around you, and you've got, that support network. And it almost, like you said, you've done your own kind of research, and then you've got that support and that help. And I can imagine that is incredibly important.
Yeah. I've got a partner who understands, because he has his own differences.
Yeah.
And, I've got a supportive family, and I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't have caffeine, because I don't have any chemical that can change my sleep pattern. Because for me, the biggest trigger is sleep.
Wow. Okay.
So I basically avoid anything that is going to affect my sleep negatively. Yeah. And I need to get, it would be a minimum of 4, but I need to get 7 hours most nights in order to make sure that I stay on a level. Now, my level is quite like up and down.
Okay.
But when I've taken medication, I felt like I was a bit letterboxed, insofar as I remember asking one of my psychiatric nurses, is this what it feels like for everyone else? Because it's quite boring.
I like this, and then this and this.
I like the meander. I don't want to be cured. It's I like my brain the way it is. Thanks.
That honestly, it's so fascinating. Every time I learn so many more things, about you, and then you just kind of, put in that all these different elements to it. But you would definitely say, the support element of having people around you that can help and understand, and the team element is so crucial.
I think I didn't tell anybody that I had bipolar disorder. I had about 5 friends and family members. Maybe in total, 5 people knew that I was diagnosed with bipolar. I was really ashamed, because people say, like, what are you, some kind of nutter? And
I think it is that reaction.
Yeah,
that stigma from people really kind of not understanding exactly what it is. As soon as you mention, bipolar, that do you get that kind of? Are they a bit standoffish, or are they a bit kind of wide-eyed, or I'm not too sure how to act around? Yeah,
you'll get people go, "Oh, she's coming! Quick, hide the knives!" And people make stupid comments, really stupid comments, like, "Are you seeing anything now? Can you see anything now? What's it like?"
Even if they're doing it in jest, or in making these things, those things, over a long period of time, or even in a short period of time, they're quite damaging, quite hurtful, aren't they? For someone to have to listen to those, and then it almost stops you thinking, well, actually, how do I go to, say, if I know you work for yourself and that now, but that element of going to a boss after you've been employed, and maybe you've been in the company for quite some time, and you get to a point where you go, actually, I really need to speak to someone. Yeah. Some companies will be incredible and be very supportive, but that element of you're speaking to people and that's their reaction, how do you feel, when you go to maybe your employer? That could be a whole, No,
I didn't used to declare it. It's only been the last 2 jobs that I've declared it.
Yeah.
Right.
What was the reaction to it?
I've got to be honest and say mixed.
Yeah.
So I don't want to name my previous employers, because I'm going to talk quite general terms here. There are those who are very understanding and sympathetic. Bear in mind, literally my job is to do reasonable adjustments for people who have autism. Yeah. I'm all about, the 2010 Disabilities Act and the 2014 SEND Act are kind of written in me, because I've been an advisory teacher. I've been a special needs teacher for at least half of my career, my 21-year career. So it's ingrained in me. Yeah. And I work with people who should know a little bit better. And some have been absolutely phenomenally amazing. Like, you know, I was really anxious about going to this one particular training course because it was somewhere I hadn't been. And my friend went and walked around it and filmed it all for me so I could see where I was going. That was amazing. That was brilliant.
Yeah, incredibly helpful.
And then there's other people who will make comments about, you know, should you be working with children and, you know, things like that, which and also as well, there's a lot of banter. I don't like banter. I can't understand it.
No, it's so do you think? No, I completely understand that banter element. You know, I've had it, you know, throughout most of my life with the element of, you know, dyslexia. You know, let's play Scrabble and don't let, you know, Darren, it'd be hilarious, Darren playing Scrabble, or, you know, all these different things that, you know, different elements, but we won't go into those elements. But I think it is that that awareness and people actually understanding exactly what it is, and taking the time to understand it. You know, especially I think in an employer side of it. And don't get me wrong, as an employer, there's so many things that, you know, we have to understand if we've got, you know, if we're having members of staff working for us, and, you know, some are really, really good at it. Some, you know, probably need a little bit more kind of help and education around those elements of it. But it should be a case of the individual going to that, the employer, and at least them having a basic understanding. And then even if they then have to say, well, yeah, well, you know, leave that with us, we'll look more into it. But not that kind of, you know, that shock. Okay, well, I don't know what to do with you. I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah. And it's just like, you know, like there's a lot of like, people will say, oh, that's a little bit cray, or like, you know, oh my God, I'm having a manic episode. Oh, I'm so manic today, you know, and like what they mean is I'm doing everything quickly. Like they don't really understand what a manic episode actually is.
No.
You know, and like people make jokes about mental health, and like people will use, oh, you're a lunatic, or you're a loony, or you're, you know, it's ableist, really.
It's absolutely terrible. We're coming up to the end of our session, and it's been incredible that we've been able. I'm not going to jinx it by saying we've got through without any technical hits on the I just want to kind of just briefly, just for, you know, really kind of quickly. So I work for myself. I was in, you know, corporate for many years, and then decided to kind of set up on my own. Why do you think? And again, this might be general in the sense. Why do you think so many neurodiversity people are self-employed? I mean, don't get me wrong, there are a certain pool of people that aren't neurodiverse, but I know so many neurodiverse people that choose to be self-employed.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, there's the two things. There's the hyper focus and wanting to go in all the directions in which you want to go. Like, I can work in a straight line, don't get me wrong. I worked in schools, right? Schools are pretty institutionalized, you know, this and this and this and this. But I want to do what's over, you know, I want to have a look at that over there. And why is it like this over here? And, you know, I want to go in different directions to things. Yeah. Also, I think I'm a little bit necky because, you know, we were talking about the struggle, weren't we? We were talking about you have to get, there's a little bit of a struggle with you getting a diagnosis.
Yes.
And also as well, I you know, my partner and I talk about this quite a lot. When you've had mental health problems, it's a bit like you've stared into the abyss. So you've seen like bad, you know, you've seen what really bad can be. So what's the worst thing that can happen? You knock on a door and then people close it in your face. There's loads of other doors, aren't there?
Yeah.
You know, there's a different direction you can go in. And sometimes when people say no to you, I think if you're neurotypical, then you fit in better with employment, because I think employment was invented for neurotypical people. Because they do a work, and this is the work. This is what the work is. And at the end of it, they get paid, you know? So,
I think we generally, you know, speaking from my perspective, I generally, you know, I think I've got to a stage now where I you know, if I had to work, you know, if I had to go and get a job, I don't care what I do, you know, if I needed to, you know, to work and pay the bills and everything else like this, I would. But I think I love the element of, you know, I don't know if it's the ADHD, the dyslexia side of it, but that creative and doing things new. And then, and not having that same, routine, I guess, or I don't know.
I mean, I like what it is with the teaching is that I can just fill in the gaps of something. So, for example, something that I'm working on at the moment is I've decided to write an early years screener, because I did a lot of Googling to try and find out whether there was an early years screener that teachers and educators could use to identify whether a child might have, communication difficulties, sensory difficulties. Okay. Not to diagnose, it's just for you to give you an idea of what kind of interventions you might use. And lots of similar things exist for dyslexia, dyscalculia, etc. So I thought, well, there should be one for autism in early years, and I couldn't find one, so I just wrote it. I just wrote one myself, because he wasn't there. So I thought,
and did you didn't have a broken leg while you were doing that, did you? Or broken arm?
No, I didn't break my leg. This was recently. The leg is much better, by the way.
That's fine. I didn't want to see a regular theme then to go, okay, I've broken arm, I'm now gonna write this.
Well, I just think, look, I've got a good friend who says you should turn stuff to gold, and I think, you can end up with what can seem like a really terrible situation, but there's always something that you can learn out of it. And I think if you're neurodiverse, you've kind of you've had to live in a neurotypical world.
Yes.
So you had to live in a world where you can't just sit there and flick stuff in front of your eyes for the entire geography lesson. You have to sit and listen, even though that's what you really, really want to do, and you can't just write as much as you know about a child in a school report. You have to stick to the rules.
Yeah,
and it's really nice. Yeah. And it's really nice to be able to I'm just doing this. I'm writing this earliest thing screener, self-funded, and I've just put on Twitter, I'd like some OTs to help me. I've put on Twitter, I'd like some speech and language people to help me, and they've started helping me. And I'm going to trial it with some early years practitioners, and then I'm going to see if I can get it published. Just because I want to, really. And if it was in a school, I couldn't do that. There would be a hierarchy of people that I'd have to ask, and I'd have to get.
It's a massive. I always see it. When I was working in corporate, and we were looking after many, retail outlets and everything else, to make a decision, I always see it as this massive, huge sort of cruise liner or big, ship, and you make a decision, and then it starts, turning around ever so slowly to make the decision. And I love the fact that, right or wrong, you make a decision. It's kind of, you could wake up and go, actually, we're going to do this today, and you make
excited about it as well, and that's the other thing. The other thing is as well, when I have my down days, which I do have because I am bipolar, if I have a day when I'm having not a great mental health day, I can clear my diary and move it to another day. I can have the afternoon to just go for a walk or do something do some yoga, chill out in some kind of way, and then I'll be better the next day, and I'll be much better the next day, and I'll be able to do all that stuff. Whereas if I'm having to follow, this is what you do and this is what you do, and in schools, literally a bell rings and you have to do something. It's that.
Yeah, I agree, and that element of, I always find when we were running our marketing agency, when we had apprentices and staff, I wouldn't have that element of saying, right, okay, you need to be in at 9 o'clock, open your laptop, and now be creative. It's a completely different time and skill and that side of it. I just want to share we did pronounce your the name correctly. Thank you so much for this. She did mention that you're probably it was just a comment. You're probably more suitable to teach neurodiverse children because you can understand them better, which I thought was really lovely thing to say.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Sally Coles Robertson said, "Thank you for being so authentic."
Oh, you're welcome.
Which was really nice. And we've had a from Joanne Monic OBE. This is totally to point. The organizations need a fundamental awareness of inclusion, microaggressions, and unconscious bias. Every organization needs role models. We all have something to bring to the table, and a diverse range of employees can only increase productivity. Thank you so much.
That's amazing, Joanne. Thank you.
For this, we've had some incredible comments in there. We really do appreciate your time, Catrina, and everyone's time that they've taken to come on here. Where again, apologies for any interference that we've had through different technical side of it. But Catrina, if people, because I know you mentioned that you had, you've got reports and stuff. How can people get in contact with you if they would like to?
You can if you DM me on LinkedIn, or I am at Neuroteachers on Twitter. You can DM me that way. I also have a Facebook group called Neuroteachers. It's called Neuroteachers, Neurodiversity and Inclusion for Autistic Learners. If you want to contact me on Facebook, I'm under Catrina Anne Lowri, Lowri. So the way you pronounce it is, if you imagine Rihanna, the singer, doing the limbo low-re. Okay.
That's a great way of being able to kind of remember things. And what we normally ask our amazing guests as well is, obviously on this live there'll be if there's any questions that pop up, between now and then, we'd be more than happy to answer any of those questions, and I'm sure Catrina wouldn't mind either. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much indeed for your time, Catrina. Hope you've enjoyed coming on to Neurodiversity Stories.
I really have. Thank you so much. It's been a really good morning, actually.
Oh, bless you. Very long, but very, very successful.
I'm so lucky I get to do it twice.
Successful morning. Thank you so much, Catrina, and I will see you very, very soon. Take care.
Okay, Darren.
So guys, that was Catrina. Thank you so much again for everyone that joined our Neurodiversity Stories, and I hope you enjoyed yet another week of being able to understand more about neurodiversity and people's lives behind the kind of the job and behind the person and their lived experience. Guys, we'll be back next Friday at 11 o'clock. Fingers crossed there's no technical issues. I'm sure there won't be. Thank you so much again. If you would like to share your story as well, then please do get in touch. We would be delighted to share your stories. Take care. Have an amazing rest of the Friday and a fantastic weekend. Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.